Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the XP Billionaires podcast. My name is Ray Thegrim. I am your host for today. I am also joined by my co-hosts, Sky Knight and the Mel Zerker. Let's say hello to them. Sky, how are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. I think I am becoming one with my chair.
That would not surprise me.
Yeah, is it a good chair?
It's a relatively good chair. It's had better days in some ways, but it's still very comfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah. We will have to replace it someday. So, maybe at least get that centered in your mind someday so the farewell isn't so awkward.
Shh. You will speak not of this.
All right. And Mel, how are you doing today?
I am good. I am between games and I am torn between if I want to start Pillars of Eternity or Disco Elysium next.
Disco Elysium!
Immediate opinions.
God.
Having only played Pillars of Eternity, I say Disco Elysium as well. I started out, I was actually going to stream it at one point originally before I stopped streaming, and I found I'm not sure if I'm just really bad at the game or if there's something I completely missed about it, but I was having a lot of trouble staying alive. I think the next time I go through it, now I went on normal difficulty, so I'm probably going to go on easy this time, if I try it again, just to give myself a better edge and try to make things work a little more to my advantage. But it's not an easy game, and I mean I don't think Disco Elysium is all that easy either necessarily, but I don't know. I think it would just be the better choice.
Okay, well, strong opinions. All right, so I guess maybe
Yeah.
I'm not trying to decide anymore. Maybe I know.
No,
That was the one that was higher ranked. I'm gonna play them both anyways, but it's like which one's next?
Disco Elysium would be so your thing. Like,
I'm gonna eat up that story.
oh, you're gonna eat it up. You're gonna eat up the story. You're gonna eat up how the rolling works and how like the sort of tabletop influence in it, and how different parts of the protagonist's personality affects the game. Oh, it's so good.
Oh yeah.
All right. So before we've even started with the main topic, we may have selected Mel's next game. So definitely hope to hear some progress reports on that for the next little while.
I'm pretty sure this proves that the podcast works because now I know what to play next.
Good. Good point. I did not think of that. So you heard it here. We help make good gaming choices, and hopefully Mel will be able to vouch for that the next time we talk to her. Well, at least over the next couple of episodes, I should say.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, let's get started with this week's topic. So, this is going to be a little different. It's not what you're going to expect from us, because I think there is an easier way for us to do this topic, but we chose the more difficult route, and I think we're going to have a lot more fun this way. So, here we go. So building your best party can sometimes be way easier than usual. Sometimes you have no trouble finding your favorite characters. Oftentimes you just go with who happens to be the strongest. But on rare occasions, you find that some characters are completely ignored because, I mean, to put it bluntly, they're useless. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about useless RPG characters. But rather than do something like a top 3 or a good idea, bad idea on this particular subject, I want to talk about the concept itself of a useless character and its application in an RPG game. So the first question I have for the group is, let's make it easy. How do you define a useless character? Mel, why don't we give you a start?
All right. How do I define a useless character? So for me, it comes down to the question of versatility. In our last podcast, we talked a bit about in Octopath Traveler how important it is to be able to change characters and make them fit what your party needs. And I think that's what it comes down to is if you only have one job, like if you're 100% a healer and that's all you do, then you're useless to me unless I need healing. And that just extends to all levels of the game. So it's mostly about always having something that the person can do that has benefit and value. So I think there's a lot of games early on where you get characters who are at low levels and you have to kind of build them up over time. You have to spend time or money to make them more versatile. I think that's okay. I really love in Star Ocean Till the End of Time, you have Sophia, who you get back halfway through the game, or maybe a third, and she's at level 1. But if you invest the time in her, she is really great. So I think you can make someone worthless at times and useless at times, but like it's really important that they have something to grow into and something you can see that they're going to grow into.
That's fair. It's an interesting point. I don't know. Like for me, I have a completely different definition of a useless character. I thought about it really hard, and I decided that in order to be considered a useless character, you need to meet two criteria, and you have to meet both of them in order to qualify. The first part is if you have no unique abilities or really anything to contribute that another character can't already do in combat, and if that character's presence could have just as easily been done with an NPC. I think back to Frank, which I know we've talked about a few times on here, from Shadow Hearts from the New World, the French American ninja character. He was not necessary. He just showed up and was like, "Oh, I can offer you this," but I feel like, there could have just been an NPC. They could have done that, and then I would have never had to look upon this ridiculous mix of stereotypes all in one.
Yeah, Frank was ridiculous. The versatility aspect is also interesting because for me it's not necessarily a disqualifier if what they do is really good. But it does help them be overall more useful if they're versatile because you can use them in more party combinations. So yeah, not necessarily a deal breaker, but I think it's an interesting point. To be honest, my answer was more similar to Rafe's, I think, in that a useless character for me has little or no utility in battle. They're either too low powered, or just don't have good abilities, or just have terrible synergy with the rest of your party. But also, I think a useless character generally has limited story use or likability. And Kryn from the original Suikoden will be a thorn in my side until I die. He is the most useless piece of shit. I consider a character even more useless if they are awful and forced into my party. And yes, I'm still looking at you, Kryn. Still looking at you. By the way, don't try to make Kryn useful. I tried.
All right, fair enough. That's good advice. But it's definitely an interesting fact. Like I I have problems with just anybody that can easily be replaced, and that'll always be where I kind of draw the line. If I hesitate to say this because I really kind of liked the character, but another one that I had a problem with, and I consider a useless character based on my criteria, was Gogo from Final Fantasy VI. And like he fits that. There he has we don't even know because that character is shrouded in mystery. But Gogo has no bearing on the story, just a random bonus character that you can pick up, and doesn't do anything better than anyone else, even though they can do everything the other party can do based on what you need to fill that gap. Now, this leads into Mel's point about versatility. And like, I don't know, like in a situation like that, how would that work for you, Mel?
Like, yeah, I mean, I think it depends. Like, I think you guys make really good points. Like, sometimes there's a character that just does one thing really well, and like that's fine. And there's more to it too. You know what I mean? Like sometimes there's a character who's like useless in combat, but really, really meaningful in story and things like that. And I don't mind like when that's on purpose.
Yeah, like I'm gonna go back. I'll go back to the Suikoden example again. Like, say Suikoden 1, the same game. Like, Gremio is a shitty playable character. He is. Like, he's not, like, Kryn awful, but he's not good. But he's also extremely likable and extremely important to the plot, which means that I'm like, okay, despite the fact you kind of dragged the party down a bit, I don't mind carrying you around so much. It's a little different when it's that asshole Kryn who is not only an asshole, but is useless in battle, and they force him into my party.
Yeah, and I think that's another good point is like whether or not they're an option, right? Like if you say like in Octopath, right? You say like, you have to keep the person you started with in your party, and then you're like, well, I guess now this character is useless, and I always have to have them in party. That's different than if like I have the option to deal with them.
Oh, sure, and in plenty of games, like there's forced switch ups of parties, like they take certain people out for plot reason X, and force certain people in. Like the whole reason Kryn gets forced into your party in Suikoden 1 is because he's a thief and you're breaking into a castle. And also a mansion. There was that too. Though I can't remember if Kryn was actually in your party at that point. But it's also like you got to make the difference between, are they actually useless or are you just bitter about them being in your party? And in Kryn's case, it is both. Sorry. I have all the Kryn rage.
That's okay. That's okay. So yeah, so the next thing I want to ask, like we now established that, at least our definitions of a useless character, and they are varied to some extent, which is great because I know this is not going to be a question with one solid answer, and that's one of the reasons why I asked it. But so here's a little bit of theorizing. Why do you think these characters are even included and or playable at this point?
So for me, like I mean, theoretically, like the designers know, right, that a character is maybe not going to be as useful. Like it's not their first game, right? So I think in a lot of cases, maybe there's a sense that there's a gap that you need to fill. Like if you have access to a party, everyone needs to have access to every kind of ability. Like even if it's just, one person gets in persona, Sayo, or anything like that. You need someone who's going to do that. But then the game is going to have its own pros and cons to that. So, like, if I have a character who's weak to fire and a character who's weak to ice, generally games have more fire enemies than ice enemies, just broadly speaking. So, the person who has the ice weakness is going to be less useful. So, it makes sense in that there's a gap, but like there's just the balance of the game itself makes that feel a little wonky. For me, I think that's like a big part of it is like oftentimes I'm just like, I know I need a dedicated healer, so just give me the character who's a dedicated healer. Like it's just what you're gonna get.
That makes sense. I mean, I think people get used to certain structures in these party combinations. And so I think designers play to that quite often so that, people look at it and go like, okay, I recognize how this is supposed to work. But unfortunately, like no game is going to be perfectly balanced that way. It's impossible with all the elements, both figurative and literal here, at play. Like everything from monster weaknesses to how different each party member's stat is, or, what support abilities they have. All those things affect party balance. So I guess it's only natural that some characters get left behind.
Yeah, and I mean, I think to some degree, like some combos, like some people will always play this way. They're always going to need this kind of character, and like it's not so much the characters that are like I don't find them useful, but someone else does. It's the ones that everyone agrees are useless. That's weird to me, because like I'm using Yusuke as an example because he's weak to ice, and like I can give him an item that makes him unhittable at that weakness, right? And then he's okay. But like when they have so many flaws that everyone agrees they're useless, it's just how did that happen? I'm still, yeah. I have my opinions about it, but I'm not sure.
No, fair enough. It's definitely a good theory, and does make a lot of sense. So, mine, I went with something a little different. I wonder if sometimes these characters were initially supposed to be more useful than they actually are. Like, I'm thinking that in these cases, they were initially written to be a way more important, from a story perspective, or which would have potentially allowed them as playable characters to have grown into a much more useful character as well. Then you get things like game deadlines, crunch periods, and then at that point, sacrifices have to be made. If that's the case, it just kind of makes you wonder what potential some of these characters actually could have had given the time. Like, I know it's not always going to be the case, and the other theories like yours, Mel, would be completely valid, but there are just some characters out there that have just made me think, like, I just really feel like there was such a wasted opportunity. I think about the decline of Momo in this case from the Xenosaga games. Momo started out being one of the most important figures in the series outside of Cosmos. And then after the second game, when we deal with getting the Y data out of her head, at that point, there's like no other reason for her to exist. Like when I played through Xenosaga 3, like I never used Momo because like I saw her very little within the story itself. She was just there still with the party sticking it out to the end, which, that's fine and that's all well and good. But at that point, there was no reason for her to be on my team in any way, shape, or form. And even in the story, they didn't really do anything with her anymore. But the thing is, they could have. Like one of the things that they were doing was, they could have used her to help out with Ziggy's story. And Ziggy having to deal with the serial killer that killed his family 100 years ago, having him resurface and all of that. All Ziggy did was end up going on a revenge binge for this, where there was no point of redeeming himself from the revenge. Whereas he could have just as easily used Momo, who was practically an adopted daughter to him at this point. She could have been a much better plot device. And like I said, it's just a complete wasted opportunity there.
This is a really good example because those games were severely crunched down from what they were initially planned to be. Like, it was originally supposed to be a 6-game series. And, they weren't able to capitalize that. And I think a lot of plans got set aside as the series went on and they had to wrap things up fairly quickly.
And I'll be honest, like apart from this major point, they did a fairly good job of tying up all the loose ends throughout the game. But Momo's loose ends were tied up halfway through the second game, so there was really not much left for her. Like Junior himself also started to kind of slide off of the track. Like we weren't even using the Durandal anymore by the end of the third game. We were just on the Elsa. So like his importance was diminished somewhat, but at least they waited until the final game to get there because I mean, you're going to tie up loose ends. That makes total sense. So there's nothing wrong with that. But when Momo was just unnecessary for a game and a half, that's a little disappointing. Sky, did you have anything to add?
Well, I think sometimes developers want to give players room to screw up. This is my theory. So to make the good choices, you need to have the option of making bad choices, right? And it also gives people a lot of flexibility in how they want to play and to self-challenge. Like, want to make a game really hard? Use the worst party members. And they can also use those characters to manage difficulty. If they want a specific section to be harder, force a character into the party who isn't very good, or at very least isn't very breakable, and you've got a section of the game that might be a little more challenging.
I honestly never really thought of that. That is a really interesting way to put it. Like I could see that. Like Shin Megami Tensei games in and of themselves are a very, very trial and error style game. And most of the time, they put a save point right before the boss, which gives you the ability to do a lot of that trial and error. Because one thing I learned in the early days of playing those games is one, save often, two, save before a boss, three, expect to lose the first time you fight the boss.
Oh yeah, particularly often the PS2 era ones in particular I found. Or maybe I've just gotten better, but I remember doing a lot of Persona 3 boss fights at least twice.
Yeah, those were a challenge, and I still think I do them fairly semi often. That's going to happen to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, though. Like, I mean, a lot of games, especially, are playing with this idea that, like, this game is hard, right? You need to figure it out. You need to, you need to get this puzzle kind of into its place, right? Kind of merging combat and puzzle together. So I think, yeah, in some games, definitely that could be the reason.
Yeah, and I mean, in a lot of cases, combat is a puzzle, especially when with party formation. So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. I really like
And
that.
and in particularly in turn-based games where a lot of it isn't the decisions you make in the fight, though those often are very important also. But a lot of it is the choices you make before and how you equip your party, what skills you have equipped, how you've built the characters specifically. That's probably at least as important and is very puzzly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, how much puzzling did we have to do to get you through DDS 2?
Oh,
Sorry, I had to bring it up.
That's a sound of bad game.
Well, it was the sound of bad second last boss, but yeah, yeah.
yeah, great game. That boss sucked ass.
All right. So, last question I've got for you guys today. Have you ever tried using a useless character in your main party? Try to make him or her useful, and how did it go? So, Mel, if you have a story, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so usually if I do it, it's because there's a plot reason, right? Like I'm going to kill this person's brother, or, we're going to face off against someone from their past. Like it's usually because I expect to get more content from having them in my party than that I think they're going to be necessarily all that useful. I actually don't mind like the challenge of protecting like a non-combative party member as long as it's not just me constantly like having to revive them from dead. Like that's tedious. But like as far as like setting up shields and protecting them and guarding them, like I think there's some cool stuff to be done there so that they can have their big emotional climax without, ruining my fight.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I find that in a lot, at least in a lot of the JRPGs I've played, it doesn't matter what party members are in your party for those particular situations. But if you're kind of doing it for your own, like this is my moral victory in that particular regard, to have him there for the big hurrah, that's a good way to do it. I mean, as for me, I mean, I'll be honest, I have not done it. It's never really come up. I scrolled through the many video games I own. I couldn't come up with a situation where I've tried to do it. I'm very much the kind of RPG player that just builds the best and most broken parties as quickly as I can, as often as I can. Once I realize you've got nothing to offer, sorry, but you benched. Oh, I've wondered what it would be like to build up a useless character just to see if I can break it. So what I might do, and I'll let you guys know if I ever go about doing this. I'll probably go up on Twitter or something like that. What I'll do is I will get to a final save point in the game. I'll save, I'll beat the game. Then I'll go back to that final save point and see if there's anything I can do with a useless character and still actually beat that game. So that's my challenge that I'm going to try. I have no idea what game I'm going to do it with yet, but I will try that at some point, and they'll keep you guys updated about it on Twitter.
I vote for Suikoden 1.
Well, at least it'd be a quicker game. So yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I will. We'll see how that goes. All right, Sky, have you ever done this?
Well, not with truly useless ones, no. I mean, often I'll go with ones that aren't obvious superstars out of curiosity to experiment. But if they're awful, forget about it. Unless they're forced into the party. Corinne, I'm looking at you. Then I'm just resentful. I'm just like, you made the offense of not only being useless, but being annoying.
I mean, that's fair. It's one thing to have a negative character or a useless character, but it's another thing to just have him shoved down your throat.
Well, yeah, and that's the major reason I get pissed off about Kryn, because they force him into your party. At least part in Necklord's castle.
Oh wow, I did not remember that.
I'm pretty sure it's Necklord's castle. And he sucks. And it's like, it's not even worth upping his weapon even. He just doesn't do enough damage to make spending that kind of money on him worthwhile.
No, fair enough. I mean, it is expensive to maintain your characters in that game. So if you're spending that money to do it on someone who's not that great, that is a real disappointment. So, and it's just, that's not like in Suikoden 1, there isn't a broken way to max out your money. But if you're playing fair, then it really sucks.
Well, yeah, and even if you are using the dice games to make a crap ton of money, it's still really time consuming. It involves a lot of save scumming and whatnot. So, I mean, regardless, it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, absolutely it is. All right. So that is going to do it for our discussion on useless characters. What a fun and fancy way to do things. All right. So I think the biggest question I want to hear about from you guys is what defines a useless character for you? I want to know your definition. And I'd like you to send that to me on our social media. You can find me on Twitter at BillionairesXP, or you can find me on Instagram at Rafe Thegrim. I'd love to hear anything you guys have to say on this topic because I actually think this is an interesting one and we're going to get a lot of differing opinions. Sky, where can everyone find you?
I'm at SkyKnightXP on Twitter and SkyKnight.xp on Instagram.
And Mel, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Feminist Gamer or on Twitter at FeministGamer3. And I GM a D&D actual play game, Darkness and Dragons. We air live on Twitch every Wednesday at 6:30, so check it out. Our new season is starting soon.
Awesome. Definitely looking forward to that. And don't forget to check out our website for quickfire reviews, written pieces, and our podcast schedule. And that's at xpbillionaires.ca. Definitely check that out. Lastly, don't forget to check out our monthly newsletter on our coffee page. That's coffee.com/xpbillionaires. Gives you all the updates we do every month. Just a nice way for me to keep in touch with everybody. And if you do feel like sending us a donation, you're more than welcome to do so, but no pressure. We just love the fact that you're checking us out. So please keep doing so. All right. So that is it for us this week. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, even if they aren't all great, the more characters you have, the more options you have to keep gaming. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye-bye.